But for now, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask everyone to stand where you are and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I am now recording.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hoorah.
Great, and with that, I will make a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda as stated. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCarthy is the first one I heard. So any discussion on the agenda? All right, and just so everyone knows, Mr. Hoyt is not able to join us tonight, so I won't be calling his name. He's absent, but other than that, we'll do a roll call vote on everything. So for the approval of the agenda, Mr. Martin's a yes. Mrs. Fishman?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Wood? Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson?
Yeah.
Mr. Loyer?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
And Mrs. Sundet?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and with that, this is normally where we would have our community open forum. I don't have anything in there. Again, if you're late to doing that, you can absolutely still type your name and we'll kind of address it at the end. But I did want to take just an opportunity for all of us to remember a very sad loss for our district this week. We unfortunately had a staff member, Miss Gail Jones, who was a teaching assistant at Brewerton Elementary, pass away from complications due to COVID. So I'd like to ask you all to join me just in a moment of silence, remembering her and praying for her family. Thank you for that.
Andy, if I could just jump in real quick, just in case there's a community member is on this and maybe wondering about sports and maybe want to talk about, are we going to do sports? When it gets to my turn, I will be giving an update and I will be saying that I will be voting yes. I did when it came across to all superintendents today for would we support high risk winter sports. So there may be somebody that's on here right now that may be wondering, am I going to be talking about that? Should I say something now? I just want to start off by saying, yes, we will be discussing that. And yes, I am voting yes for that. And I will explain the rationale when we get to it.
Great. Thank you for that. And yep, we definitely will address that. All right. With that, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept item D, personnel, its entirety.
I'll make the motion.
I heard Mr. McCarthy on the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Loyer. Any discussion on D? And in fact, Tom, if you don't mind, I believe it's in, it'll be in D. You want to just kind of recap Mrs. Sundet's question from earlier so that everyone, because I don't know if they've had a chance to look at email for the question and the response on that. So
Sure. So it was a good question. And it was basically asking, we have assigned mentors to teachers. And one of them, it looks like doesn't match up to what their academic area was. And my rationale, I knew what the answer was, but again, I just wanted to verify it. So I had a conversation with Kristen Enright. She broke it right down. And that basically is this really quick answer. We have a pool of mentors that we have to choose from. They have been trained. They have been approved to be mentors, and it has to come from that group. Some of the mentors for that academic area already have a mentor. Another person in that academic area, social studies, Amanda Petrie, we chose not to put it on Amanda because Amanda a week ago just assumed the duties of basically department head. So in ordering and in running all of those duties, we didn't want to shortchange her or whoever her attendee would be. So that's why the person that Kristen Enright assigned to the new teacher actually is an English teacher, which is very common in school districts that you have a social studies teacher and then they assign an English teacher and vice versa. So a lot of thought went into that. But it's a really good question. So if you're looking at this, you may wonder, was that a quick oversight on our part? But it wasn't.
All right, any other discussion on item D? All right, there being none, Mr. Martin is a yes. Mrs. Fishman,
Yes.
Mrs. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson,
yes,
Mr. Loye,
yes,
Mr. Patch,
yes,
and Mrs. Sundit.
Yes.
All right, I will make a motion to accept item E, the consent agenda. Can I get a second?
second,
All right, Mr. Martin with the motion, Mr. Loye with the second. Any discussion on E? All right.
Andy,
Mr.
are
Martin.
Andy, are
Yep.
you gonna, there was a donation in there. I don't know if you usually mention those before or after we vote. I just can't remember.
Generally after, but yes, thanks for pointing out. I definitely will. Yep, I appreciate that. Mr. Martin's a yes. Mrs. Fishman,
Yes.
Mrs. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson,
yes,
Mr. Loye,
yes,
Mr. Patch,
yes,
and Mrs. Sundit.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. And to Mrs. Fishman's point, and this happens often, we try to certainly make note of it, but a special thanks tonight to Mary Steffen, who was made a very generous donation to the art department. Her note says, "An appreciation for the inspiration and imagination this department developed within my children." Very, very much appreciated. And we all know from past years on the board, unfortunately, we weren't able to do it this year, but the art department does a lot, and many students benefit from it. So appreciate the donation. And Pearl will be sending out a letter on the board's behalf, thanking her for that as well. All right, with that, we move into special presentations to the board. Tonight we have, which will become kind of our regular feature, I would think, from here on in, a budget presentation. So I will turn it over to Maureen Ladd.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Tuesday, the governor did put out a budget, and as you've probably been seeing with the emails, it's been being perused and analyzed every day since. So basically, you can go down to the first one, Connie. Overall, it's a statewide increase of $2.1 billion over this year's budget. And it's basically driven by the federal, it's not CARES now, it's CRRSA Act, which is federal stimulus money. So, which is 3.8 billion. And there's an adjustment in there, and add and a subtract, just like there is this year for the CARES money. The adjustment reduces the state's portion of the school aid and supplements it with the federal aid. They are freezing foundation aid again for the second year in a row. So it's remaining at the 1920 level. And they're trying, like they did last year, to put all of our expense-driven aids and our pupil-driven aids into one big category called services aid. They did that last year too, but in the end, it ended up not coming to fruition. And basically, they restored this year's pandemic adjustment. So basically, what they're saying is that we don't have to carry that negative number forward. And it's, go ahead, Connie. And it's all set on Como calling on the federal government to be fair. We need 15 billion, and he's expecting that Schumer will get that for us, basically. And again, I want to point out that the school aid runs now have a consolidated expensed aids, and also included in that are the pupil-driven aids, the hardware, the software, the library, and the textbooks. So basically, we could essentially spend our entire night on this next slide. This is the executive run. It's very hard to look at in the form. You all see it, I'm sure, as it comes through. It's like a 185-page document, and it's very misleading. So, but on the yellow, the side, the plus 675,000 and change, that's the difference in the runs from the year we're in. On the left-hand side is the 2021 year, and the budgeted 21-22 year. So across the top, the foundation aid remains unchanged. The services aid, which is everything combined, is going up. The UPK money is still there, and it's never increased. I mean, for over the last 20 years, I don't think that's increased. The excess public and private cost aids are the numbers that are driven from the special ed costs that we spend on the high cost students. And the building aid is driven by the debt that we carry. Those add up to what I would call your total package. It's $48,389 and change on this year's run, and projected for next year is $49,197. So it's going up a little over $800,000. Next is that pandemic adjustment. No, Connie, stay on that slide. Go down. No, go back to the slide we're on. On this side, on the left-hand side in this year's aid is what's called a pandemic adjustment, where they back out the amount of money that's coming to us through the federal funding, which is the CARES Act. And they're doing the same projection for next year. They're calling it a local funding adjustment, but it's 3.3 million and change. And then they're backing it in, they're filling it with the federal money, the 3.3 million. So that's the big sticking point, because even this year, when we talked about the CARES money and next year, people misinterpret that to be in addition to our package when it's being supplemented. So they adjust our package, our total aid by that number, and then backfill it with the federal money. And then we went through hoops to get that money. Yes.
Right. So Maureen, so I want to make sure. So next year, as an example, not that our governor would ever do this, but next year, our governor is going to say, well, sure, Central Square, I bumped you up 5%. I brought you from 45.8 to 46.3, when in reality, he brought us down from 49.1 to 46.3, right? I mean, that's in all likelihood what he's going to do.
Yes. If that federal money doesn't come through. If the federal money comes through, he's just offset his money against their money, and we will be up a little bit from this current year.
Right.
And actually, as I try to explain every year, the numbers in the 2021 column are the numbers that are in the system right now for our district. They pull up as they run the 2021, I'm sorry, the 21-22 numbers. So if we go to the next screen, our budget is actually less than what's being pulled forward right now, because I don't know if you guys remember, but knowing that we were going into some possible hardships, we decreased our budget. We made cuts for the year that we're in now, and it was 1.3 million. So the foundation aid number that we have in our budget right now is actually lower than the foundation aid that they're projecting. So when you add in all the services, aids, which are actual numbers in our budget, and then the public and private excess costs in the building aid, the budgeted number for next year, we're actually going up about $2 million on the projections. Remember, it's all estimates, but we did intentionally take our foundation aid down, trying to get ready for the year that we're in now, because we've been hearing it now for 8 months that they're going to take 20% of our payments.
Maureen,
Yeah.
question. When you go back to the slide before the one you're on right now,
Yeah.
you said that's what their system is bringing up for the current school year.
Yeah.
Does that take into account the money they already withheld from us?
No, I have that at
This
the
is-
end.
This is just what they approved last year for this year.
Correct. And you have to remember, even though their quote, it's approved, all of these numbers are estimates based on what's in the system at the time. Our total aid package is never truly settled until about a year past the end of the school year. Like this year, the close of 1920 that happened in June, basically in October, September and October is when we actually know the final budget numbers or the final aid numbers, because you need to file that ST3 so that you could submit your actual spends so that they can then project the aid that is associated with that and give you a final. So it's always an estimate and process. I mean, it's in the ballpark, don't get me wrong, because we put those estimated numbers in there, but these numbers are always estimates to some degree.
Right, but I guess I'm asking the question because I just am a little concerned. People may look at these slides and think, well, geez, they've been cutting all year long so far and talking about being in a budget crisis. And according to the state, we're still getting all the same money we were promised last year, and next year we're being promised even more. So,
Right.
I wanted to clarify that.
Yep. And on these numbers for our budget against next year's projections, on the bottom, we still add back in the UPK for a state aid number that matches the runs. And then you adjust it by this federal stimulus money. Basically, then it comes out of the package and it's supplemented back in with the federal funds. It's going to have a different name next year, but essentially it's CARES money. And right now, the CARES, all districts have made application for that money. And at this time, I don't think anybody has been approved yet. So
And I just want to stress that point. So how long ago did we actually apply for this supposed new money, which is not, it's supplemented money,
right.
that we still haven't even got word yet if we're going to be getting all of that money?
Yeah.
Right.
The first time I applied was in September.
Right.
And then they're fighting about it. So there was a little bit of a court battle because it's being run by the federal government. It's being run like title money. And so we have to give some of it based on these big calculations to the private and parochial schools within our district boundaries and or corresponding to the number of our residents that go to those schools. So then that was taken to court because essentially that's not money coming to us. It's coming through us to these other private and parochial schools. So we all made our application. They sat there, it went to court. They rendered a decision. They popped out everybody's applications, made new criteria, and then we had to resubmit again. That happened in November and nobody's heard anything since. So right now we're still waiting on the $958,000.
So Maureen, and I know it's in the scheme of the big picture, it's small, but I just think it would be good information like for the unions and everyone else to have, because the governor always speaks to how important universal pre-K is to him. And yet, based on what you said, he's effectively cut it by, because you said it's basically remained unchanged as far back as you can remember, right?
Right. Yeah, it definitely, I guess I would say, if anybody looks at that number and thinks that's the cost of it for our district, that would not be the case.
Right. So just as an example, even if he was only doing 2%, cost of living adjustments on that cost from 10 years ago, effectively he's done a 40 to 50% decrease by not increasing it even by cost of living. And that's his commitment to our pre-K education. So
Exactly.
Maureen, the question may not make any sense, but you talked about the efforts that we put forth. I think it was in the foundation aid to reduce that in anticipation of a problematical year ahead.
Mhm.
I see the numbers have grown as you referenced, but is there any possibility that they're going to hold us to our hard work and not follow through with the proposal?
With the aid reductions?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what is being talked about now. When this came out last week, there was some discussion, and it's still hard to put your mind around it, that the governor had like two budgets in mind. One included a $6 billion supplement from the federal government, and one includes a $15 billion. Supposedly, this is based on the $6 billion. And the division of the budget came out last week after this came out and said that the 20% aid reductions would potentially be 5%. So far, we haven't had a lot of aid reductions. I'll show them to you going forward. And so I'm still wondering if that's going to come to fruition or not. We really don't know. And that's what this next slide, I basically put it together to say, though, there's all these moving parts in here. Because we just talked about it, the pandemic adjustment, the CARES money for this year, the 958,000 is out there. We still haven't received it, don't know if we're gonna get it. We decreased our own budget by the 1,000,003, and that is still good. If our money comes through this year, then we have that cushion. So there's a possibility between 20% aid deductions or 5% aid deductions. And then next year, I'm sure that the stimulus money, the local funding adjustment, is going to be just as hard to deal with. And we're going to have to apply for the 3.3 million. And don't forget, we have a big unappropriated fund balance. We did that intentionally, hedging our bets against this year. So we have all of these different pockets of moving pieces with more to come, so to speak. But they, you know, in our own way, I think maybe we will be okay, especially
may-
with the budget decrease that we put in effect for this year and the unappropriated fund balance. Might be able to hedge our bets against the federal money and possible deductions.
Yeah, because I mean, I'll pin this down, but the last I knew, he's not getting his 15 billion. Schumer's not helping him with that. It's not going to happen. That's the last thing I know. But I saw him tonight and I was needling him about something else. So I'll get after him tomorrow and see. What the plan is.
I believe that if I'm understanding the different experts that have like dialed down, you know, the big documents, this is the 6 million, not the 15 million. And the hope would be that if the 15 million ever
Right.
came through, that he would restore the federal local funding adjustment. And then we would actually get stimulus money, like to be used for the hardships of the pandemic. Because basically it comes out as if they're helping us with the hardships when really they're just supplementing the state aid money.
Yeah, and I'll just let everybody. I called all the local, every representative, state representative within the district. I called last week and let them know how upset I was that this money was not coming to the district, that the governor was taking this money to supplement him. So I would encourage everybody to do it because he's not giving it back. That's the bottom line. He's not going to get his money. He's in a big rut. He's already threatened. So it's who is our leader right now, basically.
Steve, he
What
says it
makes
in
it-
every one of his press conferences. He says the exact same thing.
No, I know.
Makes it-
And he's not, it's like I told, he's not going to get it because he's not going to get the support from Florida. He's not going to get the support from the rest of the country to give New York State all this money. He's not going to get it. I mean, Schumer can't help him, but it might change. I'll find out. But as it stands right now, he's not getting the 15. He got the 6. He ain't getting the 15.
Well, what makes it worse is the fact that it's not just substituting the money. It's making it harder because from what I understand, they can only be used for certain things and the foundation aid he's taking away are pretty much our money to spend how we see fit. So he's taking money away because we can only use it for certain things related to the pandemic. So
The only good thing about that is, I mean, obviously we haven't seen the local funding adjustment criteria for the CRRSA grants, basically. But with the CARES Act money, they do allow you to place positions in there, which for us, or any district, that's essentially what the bulk of your, your budget is. So they do allow you to pick up positions and put them in there. So it makes it doable. The part where you have to flow through some of the money, some of the funding to the public and parochials, it's minimal. For our pandemic adjustment, the CARES money, it's 958,000 and change. I think about 10,000 will go through to the public and parochials.
right, but so if I understand that correctly, then we're only getting 948,000
Correct,
of our money back, even though Cuomo's keeping 958,000.
correct.
And again, 958,000 of our money that we could have spent on whatever we wanted to spend it on. And now you're saying it's positions, and so I get it, because I'm sure the large percentage of our money is spent on that, but it doesn't change the fact that there's now strings attached to that money, and there wasn't before.
Oh, yeah. There's strings, and it definitely touches your cash flow, because like that right now, I don't have that 950,000. And even once the grant goes through, or the application goes through, it works like a grant. So you have to spend it and then submit for reimbursement. So it's a cash flow in it, as far as the spend versus the receipt. And also not included in this presentation, because it's not out of the general fund budget, but the Smart Schools Bond Act is the same way. So we've gotten the Promethean boards, and they're being installed in classrooms, and we've submitted for payment for that. And that's still sitting there too. So again, those things are all cash flows too, because you have to spend it to get it, and then you wait for the money to come.
And Maureen, I know we mention this almost every time, but it bears repeating again. That's yet another reason. Like, on one hand, they're doing more and more in these cash flow where we have to output the money, then wait to get it back. And at the same time saying, hey, but you can't keep more than 4% on hand. And yet they're forcing us to do more and more of it, right? So I just think we as a board and as a community, if we carry more than 4%, need to fight tooth and nail. And by the way, have you heard anything? Because I did hear in the rumor mill that that's one of the things that they've talked about, is that if there's a district in excess of the 4%, that could be one of the penalties, where you get a reduction in these monies, whether it's from the CARES or whatever else. So have you heard that yet?
That I have not heard. No.
Andy, if that's the case, there'd be a lot of districts in trouble, because they've saved, rightfully so, for rainy days and all these unfunded mandates that the governor hits us with. That would be criminal.
And why wouldn't he do that? It's never stopped him before.
Yep. Connie, you want to go to the next slide? This is a repeat of the slide that I had done for you in September, just to kind of give an idea of what 20% reduction of our aids looks like. Obviously, those are big numbers, and that's actually the adopted budget there. We had the $1.3 million put against this, but it really hasn't happened yet. And if you go to the next slide, again, this is a repeat from the September presentation, but we do have the unassigned fund balance of the 6.8 million. So those were two of the clouds I had in that other discussion. Go ahead, Connie, at the last. So far, these are the actual aid reductions that have happened. The first three, the excess costs, the BOCES aid and the basic aid, those reductions happened in August, and they were actually payments, final payments on the 1920 year. So that $675,000 actually closed into last year's books. So technically, it's accounted for already in the 1920 year. On the universal pre-K from last year, they withheld from the final payment. And on this year's universal pre-K, they withheld on the first payment. And then that star adjustment, I just put there because they have the star number in the aid runs, which nobody really knows why at this point. But the estimated star versus our actual star is decreased by $245,000, which in a general year or normally that just is made up in the property taxes. But the fact that they are putting that star number in the runs is making some people question the possibility that maybe they're going to do something with the star, which would be another whole issue.
So Maureen, the 20% number, a slide or two back, I believe, was somewhere around $9 million, right?
Right. And at
And
this
so,
point, this is what we're looking at.
and this is actual. So effectively already we've had $1 million reduction. So when Cuomo says he may, no, he has done some. So he may do another 20%. Yeah. Okay. So we're at like whatever, between 2 and 2.5% already. And he's looking for up to another 20.
Correct. But this is the first, I will say, as far as when these runs came out last week, and the discussions around them. It's the first that we've actually heard anything about the fact that they're not doing 20%. Because they had been saying up to this point, they were still holding on that 20%. And now they're not. So it'll be interesting to see. And also it, just to, for, what do I want to say? Transparency, the bulk of our state aid payments come now in the second half of the year.
Right.
As opposed to the first half of the year, because they know that we'll get all of our property tax money in the first half of the year. So they try to match our cash flows, help us.
Okay.
So that's all I have for tonight. Obviously, this will continue. Two big other pieces of this pie are the property tax cap calculation in combination with our debt service, that those might swing our numbers a little bit too. So I'll have that at the next meeting, and hopefully maybe even a preliminary beginning budget at the next meeting, so that we can kind of have a month or 2 or 6 weeks to really see what happens and see what we want to do.
Hey, Maureen,
Mhm.
this slide right here, I think you need to fix it. You need to start taking puzzle pieces out and putting them in the Cuomo pile.
Have them dangling on the side.
Cuomo pile, whatever you want to call it, on the side over there, maybe with a noose around their neck, something like that.
Does anybody
Uh,
else have any thoughts or questions?
Well, Maureen, is there, I mean, I know on a good year, it's still frankly a mystery and clouded in guesses, but any anticipation that by the time we actually have to present a budget to the public, that we will have real concrete answers on CARES, aid reduction, all of that, or is it going to be still murky and cloudy?
I think it's still going to be murky and cloudy.
Yeah.
I mean, you are all getting the same things that Tom and I and the rest of the administrators are. You're getting your advocacy updates. You're seeing your New York State School Board's positions. ASBO's doing the same thing. Superintendents Association, the same thing. And at this point, we all just start, saying, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? And I don't know if they'll ever come back with an answer.
All right, other questions for Maureen or to anyone on the budget?
I just have one comment. I think I bring it up every budget discussion, but again, when he talks about the $15 billion that he wants from the feds, he's trying to make up from a shortfall prior to the pandemic as well. So I want the community to be clear that we don't have a $15 billion budget gap because of the pandemic. A portion of that's pandemic related, but not all. We had about a $6.5 billion budget gap prior to the pandemic, I believe, in the state. So with that being said, and being transparent, it's not all pandemic driven issues. It is leadership over years issues. So,
Yep.
thank you.
Anything else?
Concur, Tim.
Hey, this is Sunda. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I think.
All right. I just want to make it clear then, despite the fact that the federal government realized that the pandemic causes additional costs to education because of all the PPE and whatever else districts end up having to incur because of this, they decided to give a stimulus, none of which Governor Cuomo decided to actually pass on to education. Because he took
That's
it out
correct.
of our budgets.
He's using it to shore up the
Federal government said,
numbers.
we recognize it's gonna cost more money, so here's more money. And Cuomo said, no, you don't get any more money. You get what you would have had, correct?
Yeah, over $4 million.
What do you mean, Steve? Clarify that.
Well, there's another 3.3 coming. He isn't going to give it to us.
That he's keeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Plus the one he already had. Well, not one, but well, I'll call it one. I did go to Central Square. So, yeah, no, he's not giving us that money. So you're exactly right, Mrs. Sunda. We did not get that money.
And Kathy, you were broken a little bit, so I don't know if everybody heard the last, I don't know, 10 seconds, 15 seconds of what you were saying.
I think based on Steve's comments, you got the gist.
Yeah, and that and to at least part of what Mrs. Sundit was mentioning is we're dealing with the impacts to date. Now, clearly, you know, there have been some additional costs. There have been, I hate to call them savings because it's not, but we've not incurred some costs because of not running a quote regular school year. But whenever they allow us to go back to running a normal school year and district, there will be additional costs. No one believes that it's, you know, normal, right? And so they're not, with all the time they've had, there's not any discussion around that and how they're going to fund us for those additional costs and impacts. The continuing lack of foresight and planning for the future is pretty incredible for someone who had time to write a book. So.
Andy, the technology that we've had to buy, Canvas, the PD, with that, just associated with that, the temperature, all the PPE, ridiculous amount of money has gone in to what we've had to do, our teachers, you know, just to have what we have right now, in person and remote.
Right.
Yeah, what's a Zoom bill? Right, we're on Zoom. This is costing money, right?
Well, it is the permission that we have, the license we have, but it's even bigger than this. It's even bigger than Cuomo. So what I get confused, and not to be political, is every time I have like relatives calling me up and they say, "Oh, but Biden said they're going to give more money so we can reopen schools." It all comes down to this, and I have this conversation with parents every single day when they talk about, are we bringing more kids back? And I've said this to them: we're going to be sending home a survey really soon for high school, middle school parents that would you be interested? Now, other districts in the county have done this, and some of them have got only back 38% are interested. I'm still thinking we're going to be in the 90s of parents percentage-wise that want to bring their kids back. But until Cuomo changes the 6-foot rule, we're still in the same boat regarding how many kids we can get into a classroom. And so on one hand, I take all these questions because people say, well, Biden just said he's going to give us money to reopen schools and get kids in for in-person learning. But at the same time, it runs contrary to the fact that 6-foot rule is still there. And when I get to the sports part, the governor has different feeling on that he's going to allow. But I just don't see why he won't lift that 6-foot rule. But we'll get to that part when I get to my presentation.
Any other budget questions? All right, well, with that, then I would like to move into item G, but flip the script a little bit to Mr. Colabufo's point. I think we should, if everyone's good with it, have him do the superintendent's report first, address his topics, because several of our questions and things we might have are around that, and then we can go into the rest of the board. So does anyone object to that?
Nope.
All right, it's all yours, Mr. Colabufo.
All right, so we're not the only school district in Oswego County that is now looking to try to figure out how we can start to bring back high school, middle school students. What does it look like if we were to do that 2 days a week? It's going to start with a survey. It's going to go home and we're going to have a clear idea. And we need to do that because just like what we did in the summer, that will help us figure out based on the 6 foot of separation rule. So some of our rooms are different. Some we can get 12 kids in, some we can get 13 kids in the high school. And creatively, maybe 14 when we strip all the furniture out of the room, which we're going to be doing. So in those situations of bringing back students, it's going to obviously be contingent upon how many parents say, yes, I want that. Now, we're always going to hear the parents that say, this isn't working for my kids. I just want to be fair to say there are a lot of parents that are saying it is working right now. The best of horrible situations, they figured out a way, and they figured out a way because maybe their kid plays a sport, or maybe they're in band. So that's the connection they have with their friends. They haven't had to have the mass quarantines because a lot of our schools have had pretty significant quarantines. Ironically enough, right now, our high school stands at the largest number, and middle school is tied in second for COVID cases, and we're fully remote. We're in the 60s for high school. So bottom line is, I've said it from the beginning, we will not add any more restrictions that the governor has not already imposed on us on his reopening. So when it comes to that part right there, Kristen Enright, Connie Galvan, and her staff have been really rolling the sleeves up, looking at ways to be able to figure this out. I've said it from the beginning. I'm always going to take phone calls from parents that say, Tom, haven't you called other districts to see how they've done it? Well, we have. But we not only talk to their administration, I've talked to parents in other districts that I know. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not going to name a district, but I can tell you right now, instruction has significantly diminished from the districts I've spoken to because their kids are in twice, which is up to 40 minutes and some 50 minutes, staying just under the threshold that would require a quarantine 2 days a week. And for the majority of people that I've spoken with, instruction has just dropped off the table for the other 3 days. So now we have a trade-off. We want to bring kids in, and what they're working on is how do we do that 2 days a week, which means the teachers would be teaching 5 full days without a significant drop-off to the level of instruction that is going out there remotely. So really what we've looked at, the only way that we're able to do this is to do simultaneous synchronous instruction. So the teachers are teaching to the kids in the classroom and the rest of that class are at home. We have some classes with 29 students in there. Well, if you do the math and you say, well, we can only get 12 or 13 or 14 in classrooms, how are we going to be able to do this? Those are the things that we're working on right now. It's going to be significantly easier for other districts in our county because when I talk to them, besides the fact that only 36 to 38% of the parents wanted to bring their kids back at this time for high school and middle school, but their population is so small that at any given day, they're only going to have 100 students in the building. If you gave me 10 minutes and a chalkboard, I could put together a whole master schedule right now, because I used to do master schedules back in the day, to make that work. We're significantly higher. Even if 50% of the parents, that's still 600 kids that we're going to have in our buildings with social distancing still in place. So these are things, and I'm going to say this right now, I've never seen a smarter person than Kristen Enright when it comes to putting everything on a table and figuring everything out. Between her and Connie Galvan sitting together, looking at all this, it's pretty remarkable. And then when they're starting to get feedback from teachers and what are those obstacles right now that we would be able to take care of. So that's that part of it. The second part of what I want to talk about took place on Friday. I want to say 6 p.m. when we got word that the governor has allowed for high-risk sports. So that was a complete shock to us. So currently our high school has plastic all up in the gym, full transparency, because we were going to start moving to paint that. There was a break in that they would be able to paint that, be done mid-February. Well, we're taking the plastic down because now the governor has given the approval. The local health departments have given their approval. And I just got something from Dr. Christina Lipke from Oswego County Health Department that basically said, well, on one hand, we see that this is going to happen, but on the other hand, they're saying that no, they're not going to be signing off for spectators. So now we're looking at an additional cost for live streaming so that the parents and family members would actually be able to see their kids compete, not only in sports, but in things like Winter Guard, things that normally we would be able to have visitors, that now we won't be able to have visitors. So the reason why I voted yes, I don't want anybody in the public, but I'm going to take these calls, and I guarantee it's going to be hundreds of them, that are going to think I'm being hypocritical, that why am I not allowing full classrooms, and why I'm doing 6 foot of separation in the classrooms, but then how am I allowing the kids to then wrestle with masks? I don't know how that's going to work. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I've seen wrestling at the high school level. Don't know how they're going to be able to keep that mask on. Or, basketball, volleyball, all of the, high risk winter sports that ice hockey, our kids play over at Fulton, and follow all those. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm being a hypocrite. So I was really torn with this. And then I came to the conclusion that how could I say no? Because I said from the beginning, we won't have any additional restrictions that the governor's already put on us. I would be a hypocrite if it was Tom Colabufo's rule or Central Square's rule of the 6 foot of separation, but it's not. So I've said it to every parent that called me venting their frustration. And I said to them, if they lift that 6 foot rule and the health department say it's now fine for the students to come in, probably still obviously wearing masks, we would do that. So how can I now say no for winter sports? So I know this is pretty divided among superintendents, but my decision was to allow it. Parents will have that opportunity to say yes or no. I do understand the whole community spread and not letting people go in there. And I played 3 varsity sports, so I just would want to play. Yes, it'd be great if my parents could see me live, but I would rather just be able to play my senior year. So those are the things that we're looking at. I hope more superintendents. I'm having a Zoom meeting tomorrow, and I'm basically going to give my perspective to the other Oswego County superintendents. But I get a lot of their, other superintendents in other counties, including my counties, are struggling with this whole, wouldn't we be hypocrites? And my answer is no, we wouldn't be, because we didn't make that 6 foot of separation rule in the classrooms. We could only do what the governor has laid out for us. And do you have any questions about that? Did I cover all of that?
Any questions? I don't.
Tom, I have one question on your prior discussion. What's kind of the number of students that would return that we could even do any in-person learning for 6 through 12 or whatever we're looking at? There's got to be a number that just makes it quite candidly impossible, I'm guessing, or is there not?
Well, if we can do it synchronously, that meaning that they're teaching while the kids are at home, and it's going to be simultaneously. So those kids, let's say I'm in a chemistry class, half of my chemistry class, like on an AABB day or whatever, they're in person. I would be participating from home. If we can pull that off, well, that's obviously going to be a game changer for us. If we can't pull that off, and let's say we have 97% of our, just like the summer, 97% of our high school parents wanted to send their kids, where in Onondaga County, it was like anywhere between 40 and 50% wanted to send their kids. They were able to configure things differently. I can't give you a number right now, Tim. I can just say it's going to be difficult if it's in the 90s to be able to pull this off, because it's like we're dividing it 3 different ways just to get that one chemistry class in for in-person. See what I'm saying?
Fair. Yep. And my second comment would be on the sports. I certainly respect your decision. I know a lot went into it, your thoughts on it. And I'll go back to the parents still have the option of not allowing their child to play.
Right.
So if it's a huge issue from a community members, from a parent, they cannot play, unfortunately. So, you're covered there. So let's rock on.
Yep.
So
Any other?
yeah. Wrestling with masks on. Really? Someone's got to explain that to me a little bit. How is that a possible solution, a possible concept that can even be stated at this level after everything that we've just been put through? You guys have been put through, the kids have been put through, and they're going to let wrestling in masks?
Well, here's the interesting thing,
Jesus.
Mike. Here's the interesting thing. The governor's saying no. This is where it falls on the superintendents, because the health department from the beginning has said masks should be worn unless they can't be tolerated. Well, that caused a lot of problems with soccer, because I was getting phone calls at 7 o'clock at night from other superintendents going, your kids don't have masks on. Well, okay, we were very clear in saying they don't have to. And so how are we able to then tell the kid, well, how do we measure if you can tolerate it or not? If they say, man, I'm running around and I'm struggling with this on, I can't breathe well with this. So other leagues made the rule to basically say, well, we'll just make a decision as a league. And if a kid can't tolerate it, then the kid can't play. But then there were not our legal, but I was hearing from other districts legal that was saying we can't make a rule that supersedes what the governor had agreed to in the beginning. And he said you didn't have to wear the masks. So it would actually be the leagues that would say, okay, unfortunately, if a kid can't tolerate it, right? So I was in a meeting today. I'm on the Section 3 committee, and they basically, the thought process was, well, if a student got a doctor's note that said that they couldn't tolerate it. Now, my guess is it probably would not be too difficult for your kid to be able to then go to the doctor to say, in wearing a mask, I can't breathe right or whatnot. So I don't know what it could do with that. I just know that it was very confusing in the fall because there were a lot of parents that wanted to pull, not our parents, but parents of other teams that wanted to pull their kids when they saw entire teams not wearing masks or wearing them below the nose, not above their nose. So I hear your point. It's just, it adds to the confusion.
And Tom, is there an ETA or a timeline as far as Section 3 in their guidance? Because as of right now, it's, basically first week of February that they're looking to start the season, right? So.
Yeah, that's correct. So they just did the survey at 3:00 today. Transparently, I said yes, but that's why I wanted everyone here on record to know why I said yes before I'm called a hypocrite by our parents. I wanted them to know the 6-foot rule wasn't mine. So that went today, and what John Rathbun, head of Section 3, said was they want to try to, make a decision hopefully by Wednesday that they can then tell us what all of the superintendents had selected and then go from there. It also was a survey. It didn't just ask about winter sports. It asked about fall season 2 sports that would follow right up. Because remember, this winter season would only go from like February 1 to I believe it was like March 7. Or March 13, because fall 2 starts March 7. And there's a little bit of confusion there of an overlap of a week, that there are a lot of school districts that don't have the space or facilities to be able to have that middle overlap. And that's what they're struggling with right now.
Gotcha. All right. Other questions or comments for Mr. Colabufo? Did you have anything else to cover, Tom?
Oh, yeah. I just want to say congratulations to the following students for their recognition at this year's Scholastic Art Competition. Ella Dolce, Evelyn Dolce, Karina Stewart, Meadow Auslander, Kiara Barcom, Samantha Moran. Also to the art teachers that helped them earn this recognition, Mrs. Stats, Ms. Bergman, and Ms. Lacey. Congratulations to Jillian Howe, a senior at Paul V. Moore. Jillian is an active member of the music department and a performing member of Wind Ensemble. We are pleased to announce that Jillian has earned a performance seat in the 2021 NYSBDA High School Honor Band. There were over 400 applicants submitted for consideration. From the 400 students, 140 were selected for the band, with an additional 30 students designated as alternatives. This year's March NYSBDA High School Honor Band Concert will be a virtual production. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Colabufo. So since we flipped the script a little bit, now we'll open it up to any board members. I'll start with Mrs. Fishman. Any topics you wanted to bring up? I'll take that as a no for now. Open it up to the entire board. Any topics to discuss?
Yeah, Andy.
Yep.
Over the last week or two, Tom, Jim Duranzik, Coach Benjik, Lynn Tennant, obviously put their thinking caps on. And I think, I was involved in a couple of phone calls, but Christy Fishman, she threw an idea out there that I think maybe Tom can elaborate on briefly, but it's got the rifle team back, I think, in a good place as far as being able to practice and perform. And I just wanted to tell all those people that I just mentioned, kudos to you guys. Great thinking, great work. And again, it's just a small piece of the puzzle. I apologize for a comment about the wrestling and masks. I think that's just that is what it is. But this was a good effort, and a great idea was posed by the crew to get this to where it's at. So Tom, back to you.
Yeah, just on that, just briefly, Paul Manjik, if anybody doesn't know, he's just obviously an icon in rifle across our entire country. There's been many articles written about him nationwide. They've been nationally ranked. Some of our board members, I know Christy was on that on the rifle team. Lawyer's daughter was on the rifle team. There's a long line of people that have caught me at places that I'm at to tell me that they were on that rifle team and what that's done for them collegiately, and then just in their as a human and as a professional. So the good news is don't want to get too much into his medical history, but Paul isn't currently cleared to be able to come back. But in the process, the board was able to have his assistant, Lynn Tennant, who has been as his assistant right along through, has all the certifications, has been right there from the beginning, carrying on as a placeholder until the great Paul Menjique is able to come back. So we've been able doing things to be able to keep that program going. And I'm thrilled that we could get creative to be able to do that.
And one more thing, I did reach out to Lynn, and she said everything's working out great, the way you guys got it set up with the remote, and she went through some details with me. So again, Christy, great idea, great solution to a bigger problem. And just looking at some notes here. Lynn mentioned a Jamie individual that may be helping. I'm not sure who that is, but kudos to whoever that is as well. And thinking about Coach, hope he gets well soon.
All right. Anyone else? Any other topics?
Yeah, I have one thing, Andy. I know it's gone back and forth. I was the kind of person that brought this up, but most recently in Tom's Friday memo regarding the student representative for the Board of Education, I'm going to recommend, I guess Tom has a couple recommendations here. I don't know what the appropriate process is, but I'd like to, if there's any discussion on it, but I'd like to see those recommendations put in place for, I guess the coming school for next year. So what that entails, I'm not sure, but again, there's been a lot of back and forths on emails on it. So
yeah, in a nutshell, I can just jump in and just let everybody know. So originally, I sent this to legal, and Bethany basically said how it was written and intended in educational law is that it's worded a certain way as if multiple districts, or one district has multiple high schools, let's say a city of Syracuse, then it would come into that. But it's not intended the fact that if you have one high school, the student government can obviously have a say in that, but it's more of a collaboration, that the board can actually look at that and say, okay, here's the criteria, here's how many meetings that you could miss, and the whole 9 yards. And then they would then apply, and then the board can look at how many they want to look at to be able to then say, okay, this is the criteria, this is your responsibilities. And the purpose of this is we don't want to cheapen it. So one of the greatest things of having a student board rep is what it does for that student leadership wise and going on, putting on their resumes and whatnot, because we've had some stellar ones. But I also don't want to have a reverse effect where we make it, we cheapen the process, and then it doesn't really have the prestige that it should have, that makes it worthwhile for a student to say, I was a student board rep at Central Square. So I put that out to the board, and if you guys want to follow those, I can kind of put it on maybe a Google Doc, put how I have, and then if any of you want to add any comments, you can add any comments if you want to tighten it up even more. I can send you out that link tomorrow.
So as it exists today, Tom, meaning the proposal that you put in your Friday memo, you're giving a window for the board to offer their feedback on that, but then, let's say not next meeting, but maybe February 22nd meeting, we can review the final plan, and that would be the plan for next year. Does that work for you, Tim? Is that good with you?
100%, yes.
Great.
All right, so Tom will get that out to all of us, and then I would say by the 8th, let's get any feedback in by the 8th. That gives Tom till the 22nd then to present the final kind of rendition then.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Any other topics from the board?
No.
All right. With that, then let's move into item H for discussion and action. Sorry, give me just 1 second. I'm looking at something quick. Okay, I just want to make sure the resolution was already done. The second reading of proposed districts policies, item H1. I'll make the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
I heard Mr. Loy. I think there was someone else in there, but I couldn't hear who it was. So motion by Mr. Martin, second by Mr. Loy. I'll open up the discussion simply by reminding everyone this is the second reading, so assuming we vote in the affirmative, then these will become our newly adopted and in-place policies immediately. So any discussion? All right, Mr. Martin's a yes. Mrs. Fishman? Mrs. Fishman? Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson, if she's still here, Tom, she thinks she may have got booted.
Yeah, she's muted. Yep,
You're muted, Tom.
yep, yep.
Tom, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm just looking for her right now.
Yeah, we saw your mouth moving, so.
Hold on one sec. Go over to panelists.
Yeah, I don't see her, so she may have got bumped off, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't see her either because I can unmute her. I can't add her unless she wants to be added.
All right.
Oh,
Mr. Royer?
wait. Here she is. Here she is.
All right.
Chance, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
Go ahead, Andy.
Mrs. Nickerson, how's your vote on the approval of the second reading?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Loyer?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
Mrs. Sundit?
Yes.
And one final chance for Mrs. Fishman.
She says she's unmuted, but we can't hear her.
Hold on. Let me look for her.
Check the chat. Maybe she said something in chat.
Hold on. Looking for Fishman on here.
Christie says yes.
All right. Pearl, we're taking a written yes on this one. And with that, the motion passes. So those policies are now in effect. Before we adjourn, just remind everyone, our next meeting is February 8th. We have something like 6 or 7 meetings left before we present a budget to our community. So lots of stuff to figure out. And Maureen, drink 5-Hour Energy. But thanks for the presentation tonight. I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Laurier. Any discussion? Mr. Martin's a yes. Mrs. Fishman? I'm going to say is a yes. We'll confirm it through
Yes.
text. Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Loyer?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
And Mrs. Sundit?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks
Thank you.
to community members, and stay well. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, you too.
Take
See
care.